A millennium-long war between the two most powerful empires in the universe ended unexpectedly with just a word from an outsider. As humanity emerged from darkness, the great Emperor of Zephyrian not only offered peace, but also bestowed his most precious imperial jewels, the royal princesses. Little did anyone know that the princess-outsider relationship would forever change the fate of the galaxy. The massive view screen displayed an endless field of stars as the Synaxia station rotated slowly in the void between two warring empires. Artificial gravity hummed beneath the floor plates, barely perceptible except to those who had spent years in space. Asher felt it immediately as he stepped through the airlock. The slightly higher than Earth gravity setting, the cooler air temperature, and the unmistakable metallic taste that seemed to permeate all space stations regardless of who built them. "Follow me, Liaison Asher," said the protocol officer, a tall humanoid with iridescent skin who walked with military precision. "The delegates are already assembled." Asher straightened his diplomatic uniform, touching the Galactic Liaison Corps insignia at his collar. As an anthropologist diplomat representing Earth, he had mediated dozens of interspecies conflicts, but never one of this magnitude. The war between the Kronar and Zephyrian empires had raged for 1,000 years, consuming millions of lives and devastating countless planetary systems. Humanity had only recently ventured beyond the solar system and had managed to stay neutral in this ancient conflict, making them ideal mediators. The protocol officer led him through a series of corridors lined with massive data screens displaying galactic maps. The year was 4523 Planetary Lunar Era, long after multiple cycles of universal expansion had reshaped the cosmos as ancient civilizations knew it. "You understand 17 biological languages, I'm told," the officer remarked. 23 now, Asher corrected. "I've been studying Kronar battle dialect and High Zephyrian ritual speech for the past 3 months, in preparation for this conference." The officer gave a slight nod of acknowledgement. "Impressive for a human. But languages are just symbols. It's the cultural understanding that matters." They reached a set of massive doors etched with the emblems of both empires, the scarred blade of Kronar and the luminescent eye of Zephyrian. As the doors slid open, Asher was hit by a wave of tension so thick it felt like walking into a solid wall. The conference chamber was arranged in a perfect circle, with the delegations seated on opposite sides. Between them stood a neutral podium where Asher would work. The air still carried the acrid scent of burning wood, a reminder of the recent devastation on Sacred Light Planet, and the metallic tang of heated alloys that lingered in the memories of warriors from both sides. The Kronar delegation sat rigidly in their seats, their bodies covered in battle armor that displayed their numerous scars prominently. The Zephyrians, in contrast, wore flowing robes of luminescent fabric, their elongated heads adorned with glowing horns that changed color with their emotional states. Their eyes were partially covered with specialized filters that allowed them to control their sacred sight. As Asher took his place at the central podium, Emperor Vorak of the Zephyrian Empire rose to his feet. Despite his ancient age, he stood tall, his luminescent skin glowing with the wisdom of millennia. His voice, when he spoke, resonated with the authority of one who had ruled for centuries. "This conflict has consumed enough lives," Emperor Vorak declared. "I stand before you today to declare my intention to end this war." Before Asher could translate, Ambassador Grimjaw of the Kronar slammed his 3-fingered fist onto the conference table, sending data tablets flying, his face, crisscrossed with battle scars, contorted in rage. "You speak of peace while your fleets still occupy the Spiral Nebula," Grimjaw roared. Princess Lyselle, daughter of Emperor Vorak, stood abruptly. The luminescence on her horns and skin shifted from bright white to deep purple, a sign of extreme anger. "You dare to stare at me with such provocation," she hissed, her voice like ice. Asher quickly realized This was not a typical negotiation. The tension in the room wasn't just about territorial disputes or resource allocation. It was the result of a millennium of cultural misunderstandings and rituals gone wrong. Emperor Vorak's voice cut through the chaos. There will be no recess, Asher, if you cannot find a path to resolution. I will release both empires to continue their mutual destruction. His eyes, ancient and knowing, fixed on Asher. You have 3 days. 3 days to bridge 1,000 years of hatred. Asher felt the weight of countless lives settle on his shoulders. The first day's formal negotiations had ended in disaster. After the initial outburst, both delegations had retreated to their quarters, refusing further discussion. Asher knew he needed to understand the root of their conflict before attempting to bring them back together. He decided to begin with the Kronar, whose warrior culture seemed more straightforward than the mystical Zephyrians. A security officer led Asher down to the Kronar training pit, where the gravity was nearly double that of the conference level. The air vibrated with the sounds of metal against metal as warriors engaged in training exercises. General Bloodmark, a senior Kronar military leader, noticed Asher's arrival and beckoned him forward. The general's chest was a network of ritualistic scars, each one representing a battle victory or a moment of sacrifice. "Watch," Bloodmark commanded, pointing to 2 warriors engaged in combat. Asher observed as the warriors fought with ceremonial blades. When one warrior successfully struck his opponent, leaving a small but precise cut, both fighters paused. The victor touched the wound he had created with reverent fingers, and both warriors exchanged words in a ritual language. "What are they saying?" Asher asked. "They honor the scar that will form," Bloodmark explained. "The one who bears it has shown courage. The one who gave it acknowledges the sacrifice." Asher was led deeper into the Kronar quarter, where he found Ambassador Grimjaw in a meditation chamber that looked more like an arsenal. Weapons of various designs lined the walls, each bearing inscriptions and marks. "Ambassador, I hope I'm not disturbing you," Asher began. Grimjaw turned, his scarred face impassive. "You are already a disturbance, human. Your presence here forces us to delay justice." "Justice or vengeance?" Asher asked carefully. Grimjaw's eyes narrowed. "What do you see when you look at us, human? Barbarians? Monsters who love pain?" Asher considered his response carefully. On Earth, scars were once seen as marks of experience, of survival. Not just violence, but evidence of having lived through something significant. Something shifted in Grimjaw's expression. "Continue." "In some Earth cultures, warriors would proudly display their scars as proof of their willingness to sacrifice for their people. Each scar told a story of protection, not just destruction." Grimjaw moved closer, studying Asher's face. "And what do you know of our stories, translator?" "I know of the Battle of Green Crawler on Spiral Planet, where Kronar warriors bore wounds from acidic alien blood to save colonists. I've studied the defense of the Clutch, where your soldiers formed a living shield around your younglings during the Outer Ring Purge." Asher continued, recounting 3 more historical Kronar battles, each associated with specific types of scars that Kronar warriors now ritualistically recreated. With each story, Grimjaw's posture relaxed slightly. "You have done your research," Grimjaw admitted grudgingly. "But understanding our past doesn't mean you comprehend our present conflict." "Then help me understand," Asher pressed. "What do the Zephyrians do that dishonors your scars?" Grimjaw's expression darkened. "They refuse to look upon them. They cover their eyes in our presence, claiming our battle marks are impurities that offend their precious sight. They deny us the honor of being truly seen." Asher nodded slowly. "And for a culture that values visible proof of sacrifice, being unseen is the ultimate insult." "Not just unseen," Grimjaw corrected, "deemed unworthy of sight." As Asher left the Kronar quarter, He began to understand one half of the equation. Now he needed to comprehend the Zephyrian perspective. The Zephyrian meditation chamber was a stark contrast to the Kronar training pit. Soft, blue-silver bioluminescent light filled the space, and the air seemed to vibrate with subtle harmonics that created a meditative atmosphere. The floor was made of crystal that resonated with subtle energy waves, amplifying the meditation state of those who sat upon it. Princess Lyselle and High Priestess Seraphine were engaged in a sacred ritual. Both wore specially designed blindfolds, focusing their awareness inward rather than outward. Asher waited silently until Seraphine acknowledged his presence with a slight inclination of her head. "The human observer has arrived," she announced, not removing her blindfold. Princess Lysel's luminescence flickered briefly in what Asher interpreted as annoyance. "You may approach, but do not attempt to initiate sacred sight," Seraphine instructed. Asher moved forward carefully, keeping his eyes downcast as he had been advised. "Thank you for allowing me to observe your meditation." "Observation is not understanding," Seraphine replied. "Zephyrian vision is not for outsiders." "May I ask why direct eye contact is considered disrespectful?" Asher inquired. There was a long silence before Seraphine answered. "When a Zephyrian looks upon another being, we do not merely see their physical form. We perceive their essence, their soul light. To look upon someone is to acknowledge them as a soul friend, to accept them into our inner circle of trust." "And looking inappropriately?" Asher prompted. "Is to claim ownership of another's soul," Princess Lyselle interjected, her voice cool. "It is the highest form of violation." Asher considered this. In human culture, looking someone in the eye is a sign of respect and honesty. We say, "Look me in the eye and tell me the truth," because we believe eyes reveal honesty. "Your species lacks the perception to truly see," Seraphine stated. "For you, it is merely a physical act. For us, it is spiritual communion." "Yet you must look at each other sometimes," Asher noted. "How do you determine when it's appropriate?" Princess Lyselle removed her blindfold, revealing luminescent eyes that shifted colors like opalescent gems. She kept her gaze carefully averted from Asher's face. "Sacred sight is earned through trust and ritual," she explained. "It is not given casually, especially not to those who display their violations proudly on their skin." "You mean the Kronar scars," Asher realized. "Each mark is evidence of violence inflicted," Lyselle confirmed. "To look upon such desecration of the body's purity is to condone it, to accept violence as worthy of vision." Asher took a risk. "Princess, with respect, you must distinguish between looking and accepting. One can witness without endorsing." Lyselle's luminescence darkened. "You presume to teach us about sight?" "I presume to offer perspective," Asher countered. "Just as I suggested to the Kronar that their scars might be seen as more than just marks of violence." For the first time, Lyselle's eyes flickered briefly toward Asher's face, caught by curiosity before she quickly looked away again. "You must understand," Seraphine intervened. "Our ways have preserved our spiritual purity for millennia. The Kronar's insistence that we look upon their battle markings is a demand that we compromise our most sacred values." Asher nodded. "Just as your refusal to look upon them feels like a rejection of their greatest sacrifices." As Asher left the Zephyrian chamber, he felt Princess Lyselle's gaze follow him briefly. She was torn between loyalty to her culture and curiosity about his words. The seed of understanding had been planted, but it would need careful nurturing to grow. The second day passed with Asher shuttling between the two delegations, sharing cultural insights and laying groundwork for a mutual understanding. By evening, he had formulated a plan, risky, potentially catastrophic, but possibly the only way to break through millennia of misunderstanding. He contacted General Bloodmark and High Priestess Seraphine separately, sharing his plan and securing their reluctant cooperation. If it worked, It might create a foundation for peace. If it failed, it could reignite the war with even greater ferocity. On the morning of the third day, Asher arranged for a tour of the historical storage lakes beneath Synaxia Station. These vast repositories contained artifacts and records from both civilizations, preserved in stasis fields. Both delegations agreed to attend, maintaining a cold distance from each other as they moved through the exhibition. As Asher paused to examine an ancient tablet, a knife flashed through the air, barely missing his throat. Chaos erupted instantly. Ambassador Grimjaw lunged forward, tackling the assassin to the ground with surprising speed for his bulk. Simultaneously, Princess Liesel created a blinding flash of bioluminescent energy that momentarily disoriented the attacker, allowing Grimjaw to subdue him. Security forces swarmed the area, securing the assassin, actually, a trusted security officer who had agreed to participate in Asher's plan with non-lethal weapons. "Are you injured?" Princess Liesel asked Asher, her eyes briefly meeting his in the urgency of the moment, before she caught herself and looked away. "I'm fine, thanks to both of you," Asher replied, noting how Kronar and Zephyrian had instinctively worked together to protect him. Emperor Vorak arrived moments later, his ancient eyes taking in the scene with calculating precision. "An interesting development," he observed. "It seems our warring factions can cooperate when faced with a common threat." "Not just cooperation," Asher emphasized. In that moment of danger, Princess Liesel looked directly at Ambassador Grimjaw to coordinate their defense, and he acknowledged her sight without offense. When survival is at stake, cultural taboos become secondary to shared purpose. Grimjaw touched a fresh cut on his arm received during the scuffle. "The princess's warning saved me from a worse injury." Liesel's luminescence shifted to a soft blue. "The ambassador's physical intervention protected us all." Emperor Vorak turned away, but not before Asher caught the slight smile on his ancient face. "You have demonstrated the power of connection in moments of danger, Asher. But my empire requires more. You must transform this momentary truth into lasting peace." The assassination attempt had broken the ice, but Asher knew they needed something more profound to cement the newfound connection. That opportunity came unexpectedly from Princess Kira, Liesel's younger sister. During the afternoon session, Princess Kira stepped onto the central platform, her luminescence pulsing with determination. "I request that General Bloodmark perform the scar ritual upon me," she announced, her voice ringing through the silent chamber. Gasps echoed from both delegations. For a Zephyrian princess, the embodiment of purity in their culture, to request a Kronar scar was unprecedented. "Sister, you cannot," Princess Liesel protested. Kira remained resolute. "If we seek true peace, we must understand each other's sacred rights. I offer my pure skin to bear the mark of peace." Not to be outdone, Ambassador Grimjaw stood as well. "And I request that High Priestess Seraphine grant me sacred sight, to look upon me fully, as your tradition permits only for your most trusted allies." The conference chamber fell silent. These requests violated the most fundamental taboos of both cultures. Yet they also represented the ultimate extension of trust. Emperor Vorak studied both supplicants. "If my daughter willingly bears a mark of honor, and the Kronar ambassador willingly submits to sacred vision, perhaps there is hope for understanding." The dual rituals were arranged to occur simultaneously. Princess Kira knelt before General Bloodmark, who held a ceremonial short sword. Ambassador Grimjaw sat facing High Priestess Seraphine, who slowly removed her vision filters. As Bloodmark carefully inscribed a single, precise line on Kira's arm, the simplest and least painful of Kronar markings, Princess Liesel wept silently, torn between horror at her sister's defilement and awe at her courage. Simultaneously, Seraphine gazed fully into Grimjaw's eyes, engaging in the intimate Zephyrian connection that allowed one soul to truly see another. Tears formed in the ambassador's eyes as he experienced, for the first time, the profound spiritual connection that the Zephyrians so carefully guarded. When both rituals concluded, something had fundamentally changed in the room. The delegates began to intermingle, Kronar and Zephyrian sitting side by side, sharing stories of their scars and meditation practices with new understanding. Asher moved among them, translating nuances and cultural contexts, watching as centuries of misunderstanding began to dissolve in the face of genuine curiosity and respect. High Priestess Seraphine approached General Bloodmark. "I see the value in your heart courage after witnessing Ambassador Grimjaw's willingness to be truly seen." General Bloodmark nodded. "And I understand the purity that Zephyrian daughters cherish, having witnessed Princess Kira's sacrifice." Emperor Vorak rose to address the gathering. The chamber fell silent. All eyes, Kronar and Zephyrian alike, fixed upon him. "For a millennium, our empires have shed blood across the stars," he began. "Today, we shed old perceptions instead." He turned to Asher. "The human translator has shown us that our differences need not divide us. They can complement each other." The Emperor formally nullified all previous treaties of aggression and signed the new, Unified Cultural Understanding Accord. As the document was registered in both empires' records, applause broke out across the chamber. Asher was officially named Planetary Liaison Sovereign, the only individual honored by both empires for his role in ending 1,000 years of conflict. As the celebratory reception began, Emperor Vorak approached Asher privately. "You have earned a flawless gem," he said softly. "Choose which princess I shall bestow upon you." Asher glanced across the room, where Princess Liesel stood beside her sister Kira. Both princesses had been watching him throughout the ceremony, their luminescence shifting through shades of curious blue and warm gold. The wedding ceremony was unlike anything the galaxy had witnessed before. Elements of Kronar and Zephyrian traditions merged into a new ritual that incorporated scar symbolism and sacred site, universal harmonics, and bioluminescent light, creating a dance of unity between the once warring cultures. Asher wore ceremonial attire inspired by both traditions, the structured form of Kronar formal wear with decorative artificial scars, complemented by Zephyrian luminescent accessories, including ceremonial horn ornaments. As the ceremony reached its climax, General Bloodmark approached with a ceremonial short blade. With precise movements, he inscribed a small mark on Asher's arm, the blood absorbed into a silken cloth. Kronar drums echoed through the hall. "You are now part of us." High Priestess Seraphine then stood beside Princess Liesel, awakening a powerful bioluminescent energy that surrounded them both. She guided Liesel forward to exchange sacred sight with Asher. "My eyes see your heart and your future." Their gazes met, and the great hall fell into reverent silence as two cultures were bridged in a single look. After the ceremony, delegates from both empires raised glasses in celebration. Asher and Liesel stood hand in hand, bathed in shimmering light, promising to travel together, spreading peace throughout the universe. 3 months later, Asher officially assumed the position of Interspecies Reconciliation Specialist, while Princess Liesel became High Cultural Ambassador. Together, they traveled to distant star systems, building new foundations of peace based on understanding rather than domination. The Millennium War had ended, not with conquest, but with comprehension, proof that even the most entrenched conflicts could be resolved when cultures truly saw each other. "Did you know this would happen?" Liesel asked Asher one evening as their diplomatic vessel traveled between star systems. Asher smiled, tracing the small ritual scar on his arm that matched hers. "I hoped for peace. I never imagined I'd find love across the stars." Liesel's luminescence glowed warmly as she allowed her eyes to meet his, the sacred sight that was now freely given between them. "Perhaps that's the final lesson, husband. True peace begins with the courage to see and be seen, to understand and be understood. Their ship continued its journey through the galaxy, leaving a trail of reconciliation in its wake, proof that an outsider's perspective could sometimes see paths to peace that had remained invisible to those locked in ancient patterns of conflict. In the great hall of the Zephyrian royal palace, Emperor Vorak stood before a memorial that displayed artifacts from the Thousand-Year War, broken weapons, battle plans, and lists of the fallen. Beside these symbols of conflict, now stood a new addition, the original peace treaty signed by both empires. "Was this your plan all along, Father?" Princess Kira asked, standing beside him. The ritual scar on her arm had healed, forming a delicate silver line that she now wore proudly. Vorak's ancient eyes crinkled with amusement. "Peace was my aim. The means were uncertain until your sister caught the human translator looking at her with such intensity." "She was outraged," Kira reminded him. "At first," Vorak agreed. "But I saw how her luminescence changed when she spoke of him, from purple anger to curious blue. I merely guided the stars into alignment." Kira laughed softly. "1,000 years of war ended by a love match." "The universe works in mysterious ways," Vorak replied. "Sometimes the greatest diplomatic tool is an open heart." Meanwhile, on the Kronar homeworld, Ambassador Grimjaw stood before the Council of Generals, his new position as peace minister still strange to many of his warrior kin. "You allowed a Zephyrian to look into your soul," one general accused. "Was it not invasive?" Grimjaw touched the ceremonial scar on his palm, a mark received during his oath of office. "It was illuminating. Their sight does not invade. It connects. Just as our scars are not about violence, but sacrifice." "And the human understood this before any of us did," another general mused. "Sometimes it takes an outsider to see what has been before us all along," Grimjaw acknowledged. "Our hatred blinded us more effectively than any Zephyrian blindfold." The memorial to the fallen in the center of the Kronar capital had been redesigned. Alongside the traditional displays of battle armor and weapons, a new section celebrated diplomatic achievements. At its center stood a holographic image of the moment Princess Kira received her ritual scar, the first bridge between cultures that had once seemed irreconcilable. As peace spread throughout the galaxy, other species began to take notice. The humans, once dismissed as newcomers to interstellar politics, gained new respect for their diplomatic skills. Earth's Galactic Liaison Corps expanded its operations, with Asher's methods taught to new generations of cultural translators. 1 year after the peace accord, Asher and Liesel returned to Synoxia Station for the anniversary celebration. The once sterile diplomatic facility had been transformed, with elements of both Kronar and Zephyrian architecture integrated into its design. Where armed guards once stood watch, cultural exchange students now mingled freely. "I never imagined it could change so quickly," Liesel remarked, as they walked through corridors, now lined with art from both civilizations. "People wanted peace," Asher replied. "They just needed permission to see past their differences." Emperor Vorak hosted the anniversary gala in the same chamber where negotiations had once nearly collapsed. Now it was filled with music that combined Kronar rhythmic percussion with Zephyrian harmonic resonances. During the celebration, news arrived of a crisis on a distant colony world. A natural disaster had struck a mixed settlement of Kronar and Zephyrian citizens. Without hesitation, rescue teams from both empires mobilized together, their formerly incompatible technologies now integrated into more powerful systems. Asher watched the rescue operation unfold on the view screens, smiling as he saw Kronar warriors using their physical strength to clear debris, while Zephyrians used their bioluminescent abilities to locate survivors in darkness. "They no longer need us to translate," he observed to Liesel. She slipped her hand into his. "Perhaps not for words, but the work of building understanding never truly ends." As the celebration continued, Emperor Vorak announced the establishment of the Intergalactic Cultural Understanding Academy, to be jointly operated by Kronar and Zephyrian scholars, with Earth's Galactic Liaison Corps providing additional expertise. The first students will include representatives from 37 species across the known galaxy, Vorak proclaimed. What we have learned through pain, others may learn through wisdom. Later that evening, as Asher and Lae'zel prepared to depart for their next diplomatic mission, they paused on an observation deck overlooking the vast expanse of space. Stars stretched to infinity, countless worlds full of cultures yet to be understood. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if you hadn't been assigned to that peace conference?" Lae'zel asked. Asher considered the question. "I believe someone would have eventually found the path to peace. Understanding is inevitable once people truly wish to achieve it." "Such optimism," Lae'zel teased, her luminescence shimmering with affection. "I'm married to a princess from a species that once considered looking at my face a spiritual violation," Asher pointed out. Optimism seems justified. Their laughter mingled as they gazed out at the stars, no longer divided by invisible boundaries of empire or culture. The 1,000-year war had ended, but the work of peace, the daily practice of seeing, understanding, and respecting difference, would continue as long as diverse beings shared the galaxy. And in that ongoing work, they had found not just purpose, but joy. In the centuries that followed, historians would debate whether the peace between Kronar and Zephyrian could have been achieved without the human translator's intervention. Some argued that the empires had simply exhausted themselves after a millennium of conflict, while others credited Emperor Vorak's visionary leadership. But in the cultural museums of both civilizations, a simple artifact took center stage. A small, silken cloth bearing dried blood from Princess Kira's ritual scar, paired with a crystal that had captured the light of Ambassador Grimjaw's first experience of sacred sight. Together, these objects represented the moment when understanding finally overcame hatred. And in academic texts throughout the galaxy, students of diplomacy studied the Asher method, the revolutionary approach that suggested cultural conflicts could be resolved not by forcing assimilation or compromise, but by finding the shared values that underlay seemingly opposite practices. For Asher himself, the greatest achievement was not recorded in any official history. It came in the quiet moments aboard diplomatic vessels, in the sincere conversations between former enemies, and in the eyes of his Zephyrian wife, as she looked upon him each morning, freely giving the sacred sight that had once been so jealously guarded. Peace, he had learned, was not merely the absence of conflict. It was the presence of understanding. And understanding began with the willingness to see beyond one's own cultural perspective, to recognize that different paths could lead to the same essential truths. As their diplomatic vessel approached yet another world in need of cultural translation, Asher took Lae'zel's hand, their matching ritual scars aligned. "Ready for another adventure in understanding?" he asked. Her luminescence brightened with determination and hope. "Always." Together, they stepped forward to continue the work that had begun with a near-disastrous peace conference and blossomed into a galactic renaissance of cultural appreciation, proving that sometimes the greatest revolutions begin not with force, but with a single moment of truly seeing the other. 5 years after the peace accord, Asher and Lae'zel welcomed their first child, a daughter with skin that shimmered with subtle luminescence and eyes that held the curious intensity of her human father. They named her Harmony, a living symbol of what could be created when differences were embraced rather than rejected. As the child grew, she developed unique abilities that neither human nor Zephyrian possessed alone, an enhanced capacity for empathy that allowed her to intuitively understand cultural nuances that others struggled to grasp. She became the first of a new generation of natural diplomats who would help guide the galaxy toward ever deeper levels of cooperation. On her naming day, representatives from Earth, Kronar, and Zephyrian gathered to celebrate. Emperor Vorak, now showing signs of his incredible age, held his great-granddaughter with reverent hands. "She carries the future within her," he proclaimed, "not just of our bloodlines, but of our shared vision." Ambassador Grimjaw, now a respected elder statesman, presented the child with a ceremonial blade, not to create scars, but as a symbol of protection and responsibility. "May she cut through misunderstanding as skillfully as her father," he declared. High Priestess Seraphine offered a crystal that captured the child's unique, luminescent pattern. "May she see and be seen in truth all her days." The celebration continued long into the night, with songs and stories from all three cultures blending into new harmonies. Throughout the gathered crowd, other couples, human and Zephyrian, Kronar and human, even a few brave Kronar and Zephyrian pairings, watched with hope, seeing in harmony a reflection of their own possible futures. As the galaxy continued to evolve, new challenges arose. Ancient species emerged from isolation, bringing cultural practices that baffled even the most experienced diplomats. Resource conflicts threatened newly established peace. But each crisis was met with the fundamental approach that Asher had pioneered. Seek understanding before judgment. Find the values beneath the practices, and create connections rather than compromises. The Intergalactic Cultural Understanding Academy expanded into a network of institutions spanning hundreds of worlds. Students of all species learned not only languages and customs, but the deeper art of cultural empathy, the ability to see through others' eyes without losing one's own perspective. Meanwhile, Asher and Liesel continued their work, now with young Harmony often accompanying them on less dangerous missions. They witnessed the transformation of worlds from battlegrounds to centers of learning, from isolated enclaves to vibrant multicultural hubs. "Did you ever imagine we would come so far?" Liesel asked Asher one evening as they watched their daughter playing with children from a dozen different species, all communicating through a mixture of words, gestures, and shared activity. "I hoped," Asher replied, "but hope alone isn't enough. It took courage, yours, your sister's, Grimjaw's, and countless others who were willing to question traditions they'd never before examined." Liesel's luminescence shifted to a thoughtful blue. "And it took love, not just between us, but love of peace, of possibility." As their daughter ran to them, laughing with the universal joy of childhood, Asher reflected on the strange path that had brought him here. A simple assignment to translate at a peace conference had transformed not only his life, but the trajectory of galactic civilization. "The most powerful translation," he murmured, "is not between languages, but between hearts." Liesel smiled, her eyes meeting his in the sacred sight that was now as natural as breathing. "And that, my love, is a language the entire universe can learn." Together, they looked toward the stars, where countless worlds still awaited the message they carried. That understanding was possible, that difference could be strength, and that peace, once truly achieved, could last far longer than any war. The end of the Millennium War had not been merely the conclusion of a conflict. It had been the beginning of a new way of existence, one where seeing and being seen, in all their cultural complexity, allowed beings throughout the galaxy to finally recognize themselves in each other's eyes. And in that recognition lay the foundation for a peace that would endure far longer than the conflict that had preceded it, proving that sometimes the greatest power in the universe was not the ability to destroy, but the courage to understand.